This series of videos walks you through creating a one-to-many relationship in Spring. The videos are done using the PostgreSQL database. So anytime that you see a configuration step that's related to Postgres, you need to substitute in what we have done in class with H2. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate building a one-to-many relationship using Spring Boot JPA. I built a checklist to remind me what all the steps I need to do in order to build this application. Now, these steps are really generic, so they could be applied to really any Spring Boot application where you're focusing on JPA. So it's not really specific to this particular application that we're building in the video. So I will provide this to you, and then you can add to it as you want to, so that you could use it if you want in your own projects. So as you can see, I've already started. I created a new Maven project, and at this point in the class, you should know how to do that. So we're going to move on to the next step, which is creating the database. So you can, of course, create the database in any number of different ways. You can use the pSQL command line, you can use pgadmin, and you can also use IntelliJ. So I'm going to use IntelliJ today to do this. So I'm going to come up here and in my data source window and say I want to configure a data source. Choose Postgres, and I'm going to leave it as the Postgres database, which is the most, it's kind of the fundamental database in Postgres where you can do admin stuff. Let's go here, oops, and POSTGRES. Obviously, these are the default passwords, right? So I'm going to say OK to that. So after I've configured it, I'm going to right-click up here, say New Database, and we'll call it Spring Boot JPA example, and say execute. And so now we have our database here, and it doesn't have anything in it yet, no tables or anything, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this and connect directly to that database. This seems to be something that you have to do. I haven't been able to make it work without going through this step. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it, say OK, and now I'm going to create the data source directly. So we'll go here to Postgres again, and this thing I'm going to say Spring Boot JPA example, Postgres, and let's test it, make sure I typed in things correctly, and that looks okay, and say OK here. All right, so if I did it right, we have a database. Okay, so let's go back and see what the next step is. All right, so we got this done. So now we need to configure the Spring Boot libraries by filling out this POM XML file. And we need Flyway as well. So let's go do that. So we got the Spring Initializer, and here we're just going to type in our group name and our example name. So this is going to be, again, uh.edu, actually the other way around, edu.uh.tech.cis3368. And then here I need to make sure that I use the same name that I used in the IntelliJ app. So let's see what I did here. And I called it Spring Boot One-to-Many Screencast. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that, go back over here, paste it in. Whoops. Paste it in there. And so now, let's see, what do I need? I need JPA. Let's go ahead and see if it'll put Flyway in there for us. And we can add Postgres. And there's probably other stuff that you can add, but let's just keep it at this. We're going to have to edit that file anyway. So we'll say generate project. And then now we're going to open this up, this zip file that just got downloaded. And it has a POM file in it, so we're going to cut and paste that into our application. So I paused the video, unzipped the download from the Spring site, and then cut and paste the pom.xml into my project. And it's really important that you remember to go over here and say enable auto import, so that it will now download all the libraries that it needs. In my case, I already had most of these libraries on the machine, but so in your case, you may not have them, and it may take a few minutes for it to download. It's usually pretty quick, though. But look at how many libraries it downloaded. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Otherwise, without Spring, you'd have to kind of do those things individually. Let's see, what did it give us here? All right, so we've got the basic things here. We've got Spring Framework downloaded here, the Spring Framework boot. It gave us the Flyway core, and it gave us Postgres. It didn't give us a specific version of either one of those things. Let's just go ahead and add that. So version, because I prefer to have a version number in there. And if you do a control space on Windows or Linux or Mac, it'll give you the version numbers that are available, the ones that it knows about. So let's go ahead and add that here. This is a scope, but let's go ahead and add a version here as well. And let's see, 4213 probably is good. Whoops. Okay, so we've got that done. Let's see, what else do we need to do here? Well, what we don't have is anything in the plugins section that is going to help us with Flyway running it independently if we want to be able to do that, or setting up Maven so that it knows that we're going to do Java 1.8. So let's paste that in. So now I've pasted in the configuration for Maven to tell it that we want to use 1.8. And then I also added in the Flyway DB configuration. So you have to add this part in the plugin area if you want to be able to run the Maven Flyway commands independently. You actually don't have to put this in if you want to just rely on the application to run Flyway when you run the app. And it turns out that in Spring, if Flyway is configured and just loaded into the Maven project, it will run Flyway automatically for you. But there's times when you may want to be able to run this manually, so that's why I pasted this in. You can find this code obviously in the examples that I've given you, but also you can just go out to org.flyway or flyway.org, and on that website they have all the instructions for how to do this. The main thing you need to make sure here is that you have the right username and password, and that you have this URL pointing to your database, right? So the names have to be the same, okay? So let's see, what else do we need to do in this step? Let's go here. Other configuration, I think that's going to be it. So the next step is we need to create an application properties file to configure the database. Now you may be going, wait a minute, I thought we just configured the database. Well, not exactly. What we just did is configure the database for Flyway. So what we need to do now is configure the application itself, specifically Spring, so that it knows how to access the database. It's not done through the POM XML, it's done in a different location. So what we're going to do is come back over here under Source, Main, Resources. Okay, that's where we need to put this, under the Resources. We're going to say we're going to create a new, let's see, what do we want to create here? We want to create a new file, right? So application .properties file. So I've pasted in the configuration from another application, since you don't need to see me typing it. But the idea here is that you're going to set up the Spring data source URL, and this is just going to be that database URL that we've been using for JDBC, for Postgres, and then the username and the password. There are a lot of other things that you can add in here to configure things like logging and stuff like that. So, but we're just going to leave it as is for right now. Okay, so we've taken care of this one. So let's mark that as done. But you know, I didn't make this explicit enough. I need to add one extra step here to make sure that I put in the SQL scripts to create these tables, because obviously we're going to need this a little bit later, right? So probably this is a good time to go ahead and add that in. So I'm just going to put that in. Really, well, I could go either way. You could do either row, but I'll just put it right here. And then I'm going to say, oh, come on now, create flyway migration. Oops. Scripts. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for this first video, and we'll pick up on this step in the next video.